The next challenge appeared, a series of interconnected pathways, each one leading to a different decision point. It was a maze, but not one made of walls. It was a mental maze, where each choice they made could either lead them closer to the solution or into a trap. The paths were invisible, and the team had to use their intuition and reasoning to find their way through. At first, it seemed easy. The team took the first few steps confidently, but soon they found themselves at a crossroads. They had no clear indication of which path was correct. The paths twisted in unpredictable directions, and every wrong turn led to a dead end. Time was running out, and the pressure was mounting. Kiran's mind raced as he examined the map of the maze that was slowly appearing on the screen. There had to be a logic behind the paths, an underlying pattern they were missing. His experience in combat had always been about quick thinking, but now he had to slow down. Every decision mattered. Every step could bring them closer to success or failure. "We need to think this through," Kiran said, his voice calm despite the pressure. He looked at the team. "No hasty decisions. We can't rush this. Let's map out each step before we move forward." Yara, still reeling from the earlier frustration, took a deep breath and nodded. "Right, let's approach this logically." The team worked together, analyzing the map, discussing each potential path, and making careful decisions. They followed a series of clues hidden in the maze's design, small hints that the Ikran had left to test their intellect. After what felt like an eternity, they finally found the right sequence of paths. The screen flashed green, signaling that they had passed the second puzzle. The tension in the room eased slightly, but only for a moment. Rachel's voice returned, colder than before. "You have solved the second puzzle, but the final challenge will be your greatest test yet. Prepare yourselves." The final challenge appeared before them, a complex series of interconnected riddles, each more difficult than the last. They had to solve each riddle in order to unlock the next one, and the answers were hidden in layers of symbolism and abstract concepts. This was not just about reasoning. It was about understanding the deeper meaning behind the questions. The team fell silent as they tackled the riddles one by one. At first, it seemed impossible, the answers so deeply hidden that they almost felt out of reach. But Kiran had learned over the years that the key to solving difficult problems was to look at them from different angles. He encouraged the team to think creatively, to trust their instincts. Slowly, they began to unravel the riddles, each answer bringing them closer to victory. Hours passed, but the team pressed on. Finally, the last riddle appeared. It was the most challenging one yet, its meaning unclear. But Kiran felt something shift in his mind. He could see the answer, not in the form of logic, but in the form of a question. "What is the greatest weapon of humanity?" the riddle asked. The team was silent. They all knew the answer, but no one spoke it aloud. It was simple, yet profound. "The human mind," Kiran answered quietly. The screen flashed, signaling that they had completed the trial of intelligence. They had passed. The Ikran's test was over. Rachel's voice came through once more, this time with a hint of respect. "You have proven that humanity's intelligence is as sharp as your strength. You have passed the trial of intelligence. The final trial awaits." Kiran looked at his team, a feeling of pride swelling in his chest. They had done it. They had faced the impossible, and they had emerged victorious. But as they prepared for the final trial, one thing was clear. The hardest test was still to come. The air was thick with tension as Kiran and his team stood at the edge of the massive, glowing arena. They had faced 2 trials, each more challenging than the last, and had emerged victorious. But now, the final test loomed before them, the trial of sacrifice. They had proven their strength, their intelligence, and their resilience, but now they would face something far more difficult, the choice between victory and loss, between personal desires and the greater good. The voice of Commander Rachel echoed once again, cold and impassive as ever. You have passed the first 3 trials. You have shown strength, intelligence, and endurance. But this trial is different. This is the trial of sacrifice. It is not about winning. It is about what you are willing to give up to succeed." The words hit them hard. Kieran felt a shiver run down his spine. Sacrifice wasn't something he had ever truly considered before. Not like this. In every battle, he fought for his team, for humanity, but he had always held on to the hope that he wouldn't have to make a true sacrifice. Now it was clear that the Ikran wanted them to confront their deepest fears. In the lab, cheers and tears of joy broke out as the probe continued its perfect flight. Jiwoo felt Tun Min's hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently in congratulation. They had done it. Humanity had not only achieved faster-than-light travel, but they had discovered a completely new way to move through space. "Send the signal," Jiwoo said, her voice thick with emotion. "Bring it home." The probe responded instantly, folding space once more to return to its starting position. The entire test had covered billions of kilometers, and it had used less energy than a traditional chemical rocket launch. As celebration erupted around her, Jiwoo stared at the final data readings. She knew that everything was about to change. Humanity had just announced their presence on the galactic stage in a way that no one could ignore. The age of expensive, energy-hungry, faster-than-light travel was over. A new era was about to begin, and it would start right here, in this lab in Seoul. The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council's Grand Hall sparkled with the light of 3 suns. Representative Park Hae-ri stood at the center of the circular chamber, her traditional Korean hanbok, a splash of elegant blue amid the varied forms of alien delegates. She kept her expression calm, though her heart raced as voices rose around her in a storm of protests and exclamations. The council chamber was designed to accommodate over 200 species, with environmental bubbles for those who breathe different atmospheres and gravity adjusters for those from heavier or lighter worlds. Today, every seat was filled as news of humanity's achievements spread through the galaxy. "This must be some kind of mistake," rumbled the delegate from the mining worlds, their crystalline form glittering as they shifted in agitation. "Humans are barely past their first space colonies. They cannot have solved the energy problem." Hae-ri smoothed her sleeves, a gesture that helped her maintain her composure. "The data has been verified by your own observation posts," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Would you like to see it again?" The chief science officer, a tall being with iridescent scales, stepped forward. Their multiple eyes blinked in different patterns, showing their distress. "Impossible. The energy readings must be wrong. No civilization at their level could achieve such advancement. It breaks every known law of physics." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Hae-ri noticed how the older species, those who had held power for thousands of years, seemed the most upset. The younger races watched with obvious interest, some even leaning forward in their seats. "If I may," Hae-ri said, gesturing to the central holographic projector. The device hummed to life, creating a perfect 3-dimensional image above the chamber floor. "This is the complete recording from our test flight." The council members fell silent as they watched the human probe prepare for its jump. Many of them had expected to see the usual signs of FTL travel: the massive energy buildup, the violent tear in space, the radiation discharge. Instead, they saw something that seemed to defy reality itself. The probe simply moved. There was no drama, no light show, no devastating release of power. Space itself seemed to fold around the vessel like silk in a gentle breeze, and then it was gone. The energy readings stayed remarkably low throughout the entire process. "That's not possible," whispered one of the senior council members, their translator struggling to convey their shock. "We've spent millennia developing our FTL systems. The energy requirements are absolute. The mathematical models are proven." Hae-ri allowed a small smile to cross her face. "Perhaps the models were incomplete. Our scientists took a different approach. Instead of forcing space to bend, We learned to work with its natural tendencies. The chamber erupted again. Some delegates demanded immediate access to the technology. Others called for restrictions, claiming safety concerns. A few of the more militant species started arguing about the military implications. Order. The council leader's voice boomed through the chamber, enhanced by their ceremonial staff. Representative Park, your species has made an extraordinary claim. We require proof beyond recordings. Of course, Hyrie said with a slight bow. Earth is prepared to demonstrate the technology directly. We can arrange for a human vessel to make the journey to the council station. Under your observation, naturally. The leader's forearms moved in a pattern that indicated deep thought. The journey takes 3 weeks with our fastest ships. When could your vessel arrive? Tomorrow, Hyrie replied simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the environmental systems seemed to pause for a moment. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just developed a new form of FTL travel. They had created something that made existing systems look primitive in comparison. Tomorrow, the mining world delegate's crystalline form actually cracked slightly in shock. That's impossible. Hyrie finished for them. You may wish to find a different word. The impossible seems to be happening quite frequently lately. She could see the fear in some of their reactions, the worry about what this meant for the power structure they had maintained for so long. But she also saw hope, especially among the representatives of less developed worlds. Humanity's discovery could change everything for them. The demonstration will proceed, the council leader declared, their staff striking the floor with finality. Tomorrow, we will see if humanity has truly achieved what they claim. Until then, this session is adjourned. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, discussing the news in dozens of languages and communication methods, Hyrie sent a simple message back to Earth. The council was ready. Now it was time to show them that humanity wasn't just making claims. They were about to change the galaxy forever. She looked up at the 3 suns shining through the crystal dome, thinking about how much closer everything was about to become. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they too were ready for a new age of exploration. The HSS Breakthrough emerged from its final fold maneuver with perfect precision, its sleek hull gleaming under the light of unfamiliar stars. On the bridge, Captain Lee Minho watched as the massive council station grew larger in their view screen, its spiral arms stretching out like a flower blooming in space. Station control. This is Captain Lee of the HSS Breakthrough requesting docking clearance, he announced, his voice steady despite the historic nature of the moment. The crew around him worked their stations with focused determination, though he noticed more than a few quick glances at the magnificent station ahead. There was a noticeable pause before the response came. HSS Breakthrough. Our systems show you departed Earth 6 hours ago. That's not possible. Minho shared a knowing look with his navigation officer. I assure you, it's quite possible. We have our docking coordinates and are ready to proceed. The council station was a marvel of engineering, home to representatives from hundreds of species. Its docking bays usually handled dozens of ships daily, all of them using conventional FTL drives that left obvious energy signatures. The Breakthrough, however, had appeared with barely a ripple in spacetime. Dr. Han Jiwoo stood beside the captain, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched their approach. The ship was her design as much as anyone's, incorporating the quantum fold drive she had helped develop. They're scanning us, she noted, watching the sensor readings. Every scanner they have is pointed in our direction. The docking procedure went smoothly, despite the obvious nervousness of the station's control team. As the airlock sealed and pressures equalized, Jiwoo prepared herself for what would likely be the most important presentation of her life. The council's reception chamber was packed with representatives and scientists from across the galaxy. Some floated in environmental bubbles, others stood on gravity platforms, but all attention was focused on the human delegation as they entered. Jiwoo took her place at the central podium, activating the holographic display system. The familiar quantum field patterns sprang to life around her, drawing gasps from several of the assembled scientists. Distinguished members of the council, she began, her voice clear and confident. What you're seeing is not just a new method of faster-than-light travel. It's a fundamental shift in how we understand space-time itself. The display shifted, showing the traditional method of FTL travel, massive energy expenditure tearing holes in space. For centuries, species have forced their way through space, fighting against its natural laws. But space-time isn't a barrier to be broken. She gestured, and the display changed to show the quantum-level movements they had discovered. At its smallest scale, space-time is constantly moving, folding, and unfolding. Billions of times every second, reality itself creates natural pathways. We didn't invent a new way to travel. We simply learned to see these pathways and use them. The technical committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, a being composed primarily of light and energy, spoke up. What you suggest violates every principle of physics we've established over thousands of years. Jiwu smiled gently. No, it doesn't violate them. It completes them. Your equations weren't wrong. They were just missing a crucial variable. Space-time doesn't resist movement. It welcomes it, if you know how to ask properly. She demonstrated with another simulation, showing how their drive worked with space's natural tendencies rather than against them. The energy readings were so low that several committee members demanded the sensors be recalibrated. Think of it like swimming, Jiwu explained. You can fight against the water, pushing it aside with brute force, or you can learn to move with it, using its own flow to carry you along. We've been fighting against space when we should have been dancing with it. The chamber erupted in questions, each species trying to understand how their civilizations had missed something so fundamental. Jiwu answered them patiently, explaining the principles in terms each could understand. As the session continued, she noticed a change in the atmosphere. The initial skepticism was giving way to excitement, especially among the younger scientists. They could see the possibilities this opened up, not just for travel, but for their understanding of the universe itself. Captain Minho, standing at the back of the chamber, watched with pride as Jiwu handled every question with grace and clarity. Their journey here had taken just 6 hours, but it had opened the door to a future where no part of the galaxy would be too far to reach. The technical committee's leader finally raised their hand for silence. Dr. Han, what you've shown us today will require significant review and testing. But I believe I speak for many when I say that humanity has given us much to think about. Jiwu nodded respectfully, knowing that this was just the beginning. They had brought more than just a new technology to the council. They had brought a new way of seeing the universe itself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest breakthrough of all. The private meeting chamber deep within the council station's restricted sector buzzed with tension. Behind sealed doors and active security fields, representatives of the 12 oldest spacefaring civilizations gathered in what they called an emergency session. Their environmental bubbles and gravity platforms clustered close together, creating an intimate circle of power and privilege. Elder Ricks of the Silver Worlds leaned forward, their metallic skin reflecting the soft lighting. These humans must be contained. They have no understanding of the dangers they're playing with, no appreciation for the proper order of technological development. Around the circle, heads and various sensory organs nodded in agreement. These species had ruled space for thousands of years, carefully controlling the spread of advanced technology. Now humans had bypassed centuries of gradual progress. Their drive system has not been properly tested, declared another elder, their translator struggling to convey their agitation. No long-term studies, no safety protocols. They could tear the fabric of space itself. But everyone in the room knew the real fear wasn't about safety. Humanity's quantum fold drive threatened something far more precious, their control over faster-than-light travel. The massive infrastructure needed for traditional FTL systems had kept younger species dependent on the older ones for centuries. Meanwhile, in a brightly lit laboratory several levels below, Dr. Kim Ta-min spread out holographic diagrams for a very different audience. Representatives from 15 developing species crowded around him, their eyes and various sensory organs fixed on the display with obvious excitement. The principles are actually quite simple, Ta-min explained, adjusting his glasses. Your current ships can be modified to use our drive system. The power requirements are minimal compared to traditional methods. A young scientist from a world that had barely achieved spaceflight raised their hand. But the older species say it's dangerous, that we need centuries of preparation before attempting FTL travel. Ta-min smiled gently. Tell me, does a child need to learn to crawl for 10 years before they can walk? Sometimes, a better way of doing things makes the traditional path unnecessary. He brought up new diagrams showing the modification process. These species might not have the massive shipyards and power plants of the older civilizations, but they had something just as valuable: fresh perspectives and eager minds. Back in the private chamber, the coalition of elder species was drafting legislation. We must establish strict testing requirements, one insisted. Safety reviews that could take decades to complete. It's for their own protection. Of course. Of course, others echoed, but their tones carried different meanings. They all understood that bureaucracy could be a weapon as effective as any warship. What they didn't know was that their carefully controlled meeting wasn't as private as they thought. Recording devices, placed by younger species tired of being held back, captured every word of their true concerns. In the lab, Ta-min was showing another group how the quantum fold drive interfaced with standard ship systems. A representative from a desert world raised an important point. The elder species control all major trade routes. They could restrict resources, prevent us from building these drives. They could try, Ta-min acknowledged. But the materials needed for our drive are common. The power systems are simple. What matters most is understanding the principles, and those can't be restricted. He brought up a new display showing the quantum field patterns. Look at how space naturally folds. It's been doing this since the beginning of time. We didn't invent anything new. We just finally noticed what was always there. The excitement in the room was palpable. Species that had been told they were centuries away from true space travel were seeing a new future open before them. Their ships might be smaller and less impressive than the massive vessels of the elder species, but soon they would fly just as far. Word spread quickly through the station's lower levels. While the coalition of elders plotted restrictions and regulations, the younger species were already sharing ideas and forming their own alliances. They saw in humanity's achievement something the older civilizations had forgotten: the joy of discovery, the thrill of breaking free from artificial limitations. Ta-min worked late into the night, answering questions and helping different species adapt the drive concepts to their own technologies. He knew the elder species would try to stop this, but he also knew it was too late. Knowledge, once shared, couldn't be contained. As he walked back to his quarters, passing through the station's grand observation deck, he paused to look at the stars. They seemed closer now, more accessible. The universe was about to change, not through the careful control of ancient civilizations, but through the shared dreams of those who had been told to wait their turn. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more attempts to slow the spread of this technology. But tonight, in labs and workshops across the station, a new future was already taking shape. The stars were waiting, and now everyone could reach them. The collaborative laboratory on Council Station's science deck had changed dramatically over the past month. What started as a simple human research space now hosted scientists from 20 different species, their various environmental systems creating a symphony of soft hums and gentle clicks. Dr. Han Ji-woo stood at the central workstation, surrounded by floating displays showing ship schematics from across the galaxy. Beside her, a scientist from the water worlds adjusted their aquatic breathing apparatus while studying the data through compound eyes. Look at this, Ji-woo pointed to a particular energy pattern. Every ship, regardless of design, creates these same quantum ripples. It's like they're already trying to use the natural folds in space, but the old drives are too crude to detect them. The team had made an extraordinary discovery. The principles behind a quantum fold drive weren't just compatible with existing ships, they could revolutionize them. A young engineer from a low-gravity world floated nearby, their tail twitching with excitement as they pulled up the test results. "We modified a standard cargo ship yesterday," they said, their translator conveying their enthusiasm. Power consumption dropped to almost nothing compared to the old system. The captain couldn't believe the readings. Jai-Wu nodded, remembering the cargo captain's stunned expression. The ship had been scheduled for decommissioning, its elderly drive system too expensive to maintain. Now it could fly faster and farther than the newest vessels of the elder species. The lab had become more than just a research center. It was a symbol of cooperation. Species that had never worked together were sharing ideas, combining their unique perspectives to improve the technology even further. A scientist with crystalline skin worked alongside one made mostly of gas, their differences forgotten in the excitement of discovery. The next challenge appeared, a series of interconnected pathways, each one leading to a different decision point. It was a maze, but not one made of walls. It was a mental maze, where each choice they made could either lead them closer to the solution or into a trap. The paths were invisible, and the team had to use their intuition and reasoning to find their way through. At first, it seemed easy. The team took the first few steps confidently, but soon they found themselves at a crossroads. They had no clear indication of which path was correct. The paths twisted in unpredictable directions, and every wrong turn led to a dead end. Time was running out, and the pressure was mounting. Karan's mind raced as he examined the map of the maze that was slowly appearing on the screen. There had to be a logic behind the paths, an underlying pattern they were missing. His experience in combat had always been about quick thinking, but now he had to slow down. Every decision mattered. Every step could bring them closer to success or failure. "We need to think this through," Karan said, his voice calm despite the pressure. He looked at the team. "No hasty decisions. We can't rush this. Let's map out each step before we move forward." Yara, still reeling from the earlier frustration, took a deep breath and nodded. "Right, let's approach this logically." The team worked together, analyzing the map, discussing each potential path, and making careful decisions. They followed a series of clues hidden in the maze's design, small hints that the Ikran had left to test their intellect. After what felt like an eternity, they finally found the right sequence of paths. The screen flashed green, signaling that they had passed the second puzzle. The tension in the room eased slightly, but only for a moment. Rachel's voice returned, colder than before. "You have solved the second puzzle, but the final challenge will be your greatest test yet. Prepare yourselves." The final challenge appeared before them, a complex series of interconnected riddles, each more difficult than the last. They had to solve each riddle in order to unlock the next one, and the answers were hidden in layers of symbolism and abstract concepts. This was not just about reasoning. It was about understanding the deeper meaning behind the questions. The team fell silent as they tackled the riddles one by one. At first, it seemed impossible, the answers so deeply hidden that they almost felt out of reach. But Karan had learned over the years that the key to solving difficult problems was to look at them from different angles. He encouraged the team to think creatively, to trust their instincts. Slowly, they began to unravel the riddles, each answer bringing them closer to victory. Hours passed, but the team pressed on. Finally, the last riddle appeared. It was the most challenging one yet, its meaning unclear. But Karan felt something shift in his mind. He could see the answer, not in the form of logic, but in the form of a question. "What is the greatest weapon of humanity?" the riddle asked. The team was silent. They all knew the answer, but no one spoke it aloud. It was simple, yet profound. "The human mind," Karan answered quietly. The screen flashed, signaling that they had completed the trial of intelligence. They had passed. The Ikran's test was over. Rachel's voice came through once more, this time with a hint of respect. You have proven that humanity's intelligence is as sharp as your strength. You have passed the trial of intelligence. The final trial awaits. Kiran looked at his team, a feeling of pride swelling in his chest. They had done it. They had faced the impossible, and they had emerged victorious. But as they prepared for the final trial, one thing was clear. The hardest test was still to come. The air was thick with tension as Kiran and his team stood at the edge of the massive, glowing arena. They had faced 2 trials, each more challenging than the last, and had emerged victorious. But now, the final test loomed before them, the trial of sacrifice. They had proven their strength, their intelligence, and their resilience. But now, they would face something far more difficult, the choice between victory and loss, between personal desires and the greater good. The voice of Commander Rachel echoed once again, cold and impassive as ever. You have passed the first 3 trials. You have shown strength, intelligence, and endurance. But this trial is different. This is the trial of sacrifice. It is not about winning. It is about what you are willing to give up to succeed. The words hit them hard. Kiran felt a shiver run down his spine. Sacrifice wasn't something he had ever truly considered before. Not like this. In every battle, he fought for his team, for humanity, but he had always held on to the hope that he wouldn't have to make a true sacrifice. Now it was clear that the Ikran wanted them to confront their deepest fears. Kiran turned to look at his team. They were all staring at him, the weight of Rachel's words settling on them. He could see the uncertainty in their eyes. Everyone had lost something in their lives. Family, friends, comrades, and now they would be forced to face the possibility of losing even more. The arena before them began to shift, the ground rumbling as a massive platform rose from beneath the surface. At the center of the platform stood a series of glowing crystals, each one pulsing with a strange energy. Rachel's voice returned, this time with a chilling sense of finality. To complete this trial, you must make a choice. One of you will have to give up something precious. You must sacrifice something you hold dear, something that means more to you than anything else. Only then will you pass the trial. The sacrifice must be real. You must give something that cannot be undone. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Kiran's heart raced. What could they possibly have to sacrifice? They had already given so much, lost so much, on their journey. What could the Ikran want from them now? Rachel's voice continued, a cold, clinical instruction. You have 2 choices. You can sacrifice one of your own, allowing the rest of you to move forward. Or you can each make a personal sacrifice, something of great importance to you. The choice is yours. The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Kiran felt a wave of horror wash over him. Sacrificing one of their own was unimaginable. They had fought together, built together, and survived together. How could he ask any of them to give up their lives for the sake of this trial? But the alternative, sacrificing something personal, something that meant everything to them, was just as terrifying. Yara, the tactical genius of the team, was the first to speak. This isn't right, she said, her voice shaky with emotion. We've already given everything we have. Now they want us to give up even more. How can we choose? The others nodded, clearly struggling with the impossible decision they were being asked to make. Kiran felt his mind racing. He couldn't make this decision alone. They were a team, and they had to face this trial together. But how could they decide what to sacrifice? How could they choose between one another or give up something so deeply personal? A deep silence filled the air as the team contemplated their options. The weight of the decision was unbearable. Kiran knew they couldn't escape it, though. They had to choose, and they had to do it now. The Ikran would not allow them to hesitate forever. The first to step forward was Lieutenant Marcus, the heavy weapons specialist. He had been with Kiran since the beginning, a trusted ally and friend. His broad shoulders were tense, his face hard with the strain of the decision before him. He didn't speak at first, but Kieran could see the struggle in his eyes. Marcus was a warrior, but even warriors had their limits. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "I can't ask any of you to give up your lives," he said, his voice low and rough. "But I can't lose anyone else. I'll make the sacrifice. I'll stay behind so you can move forward." Kieran's heart ached at the thought. Marcus was willing to die for the mission, for the team, for humanity. It was a noble sacrifice, one that showed the depth of his loyalty. But Kieran couldn't allow it. He couldn't accept it, not without considering every possible alternative. "No," Kieran said firmly, shaking his head. "We're in this together. We've made it this far, and we're not going to lose anyone now. We all have something to give, but we're not going to give up one of our own." Yara stepped forward, her eyes bright with determination. "If we're not sacrificing one of us, then we each have to give something. It has to be something meaningful, something we can't get back, something that hurts." The team stood in silence again, each of them considering their personal sacrifices. It was difficult to think about, to imagine losing something so important, but Yara was right. If they couldn't sacrifice one of their own, they would have to give up something that meant everything to them. For Kieran, the decision was gut-wrenching. He had always valued the bonds he had with his team. They were his family, his reason for fighting. But what could he give up? His past, his future, his own life. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I'll sacrifice my connection to Earth, my memories of home. I can't forget what we're fighting for, but I'll let go of the past. I have to. It's the only way to keep moving forward." The others nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. It wasn't easy, but they each made their own choices. Yara sacrificed her personal ambition, the dream of becoming the top strategist in the military. Marcus gave up his memories of his wife and child. Each sacrifice was painful, but each one was necessary. As the final choices were made, the platform in front of them began to glow brighter. The crystals pulsed with a new energy, and the air around them shimmered with a strange otherworldly force. Rachel's voice returned, quieter now, as if acknowledging their sacrifices. "You have passed the trial of sacrifice. Your willingness to give up what matters most to you has proven that you are worthy. The final trial is near. Prepare yourselves." Kieran looked around at his team, each of them standing taller now. Their sacrifices made. They had given something of themselves, but they had not given up. They were still fighting, still together. The final trial awaited them. And no matter what came next, Kieran knew one thing for sure. They would face it as a team. Nothing could break them. The air was thick with anticipation as Kieran and his team stood at the edge of the platform, the final trial looming before them. They had come so far, surviving the trials of strength, intelligence, and sacrifice. But the hardest part was still ahead. This would be the ultimate test, the final showdown, where everything they had learned and fought for would be put to the test. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. The arena was vast, stretching out into the distance with no clear end in sight. The ground beneath their feet was a strange alien material that pulsed with energy. A cold wind swept across the platform, carrying with it the distant sounds of machinery and the hum of unknown technology. Above them, the sky was dark, swirling with ominous clouds and flashing with bolts of lightning. It felt like they were standing on the edge of reality itself, on the brink of something unimaginable. The voice of Commander Rachel boomed over the speakers once again, but this time there was a sense of finality in her tone. "You have proven yourselves worthy. You have faced the trials and shown your strength, intelligence, and ability to sacrifice. But now you face the ultimate challenge. The final showdown will test everything you have learned. Only one team will emerge victorious. The others will fall." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Kieran could feel his heart pounding in his chest as the reality of the situation set in. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity. The stakes had never been higher. As if on cue, the ground beneath them shook, and massive doors began to open across the arena. From the darkness beyond, a new force emerged. It was an army of alien soldiers, each one armed with weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Their armor was sleek and black, reflecting the lightning above like mirrors. They moved in perfect unison, their eyes glowing with an eerie light as they advanced toward Kiran and his team. Kiran's team immediately sprang into action. They had faced impossible odds before, but this time, the challenge was greater than anything they had encountered. There were too many of them, and they were too well equipped. The Ikran had pulled out all the stops for this final test, and Kiran knew they had no choice but to fight with everything they had. "Hold the line," Kiran shouted, drawing his weapon. "We fight together, or we don't fight at all." Yara, Marcus, and the rest of the team took their positions, each one preparing for the battle ahead. Yara's sharp eyes scanned the enemy lines, looking for weaknesses, while Marcus adjusted his heavy weapons, ready to unleash hell on the advancing forces. The rest of the team followed suit, each of them taking up positions and preparing for the oncoming storm. The first wave of alien soldiers charged forward, their weapons crackling with energy as they fired upon Kiran's team. But the humans were ready. They ducked behind cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Kiran's rifle hummed as he took down two of the alien soldiers with well-placed shots, but there were too many of them. For every one that fell, two more took its place. Yara called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We need to focus on the command center. If we can take it out, the rest of them will lose coordination."